The first thing Maria felt was the expensive silk sheets against her skin, then the dull throb behind her eyes. She woke up slowly, the room around her a blur of muted colors and unfamiliar luxury. A massive, ornate chandelier hung above, sparkling even in the dim light filtering through heavy velvet curtains. This wasn't her small apartment. This wasn't home. Her heart started to pick up speed. She turned her head, slowly, the movement sending a jolt of panic through her. Next to her, a man was sleeping soundly. His dark hair was a little messy, and his breathing was deep and even. He was big, much bigger than she remembered, and one of his arms was thrown over the pillow, a sleeve of a silk robe pushed up. That's when she saw it. A tattoo, intricate and dark, snaking up his forearm. It was a dragon, fierce and proud, its scales detailed and its eyes burning with an unspoken threat. It was the mark of the Kim family, the notorious Korean Mafia boss, Mr. Kim. Her stomach dropped. She was in his bed. This was real. A wave of nausea hit her, but she pushed it down. She couldn't afford to panic. Not now. Not here. She needed to think. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the blurry memories of the night before. There was a party, a lot of champagne, and then nothing clear. Just a dark, handsome face smiling at her, a hand on her back, and a sense of being swept away. Just then, Mr. Kim stirred. His eyes opened, dark and sharp, instantly alert. He didn't blink, just looked at her, a cold, unreadable expression on his face. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how she was. His voice was low, rough, and completely devoid of warmth. "Get up," he ordered, the words cutting through the silence like a knife. "And take this." He reached to the bedside table, picking up a small white box. He tossed it onto the bed between them. It landed with a soft thud. Maria looked at it. A pregnancy test. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just a mistake. This felt like a trap, carefully set. He knew. He must have known. The way he looked at her, the way he handed her the test, it was all too deliberate. There was no question in his eyes, only a chilling certainty. She didn't react. Not outwardly, anyway. Her face remained blank, a carefully constructed mask. She picked up the box, her fingers steady, and slid out the plastic stick. Her hands moved with a strange, almost robotic calm. Inside, her mind was a whirlwind, but on the surface, she was a statue. She walked to the large, luxurious bathroom attached to the bedroom. The marble gleamed under soft lights. She went through the motions, her mind racing, planning. When she came back, Mr. Kim was still sitting up, watching her, his dark eyes never leaving her face. She held the test stick out, not quite looking at him, but making sure he could see it. The results window was clear. A faint but unmistakable pink line appeared next to the control line. Positive. His game. Her rules now. Mr. Kim's eyes, which had been so cold and dismissive moments before, suddenly widened. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shock, then disbelief, quickly followed by a dawning, terrible realization. His jaw clenched. He hadn't expected this. Not like this. The news of the positive test settled over Maria like a heavy blanket. But it didn't surprise her as much as it did Mr. Kim. Her mind, even in that luxurious, unfamiliar room, drifted back to a different life. A life that felt a million miles away from the cold reality of Mr. Kim's bedroom. She thought of her home, nestled in the heart of Los Angeles's vibrant Koreatown. It was a place always humming with energy. The scent of kimchi and grilling meat, mixing with the sound of K-pop from nearby shops and the chatter of Korean and English. Her family was the center of her world, a tight-knit group that, like many immigrant families, carried the weight of expectation. Her parents had worked tirelessly, building their small Korean restaurant from the ground up, instilling in Maria and her siblings a deep respect for hard work and tradition. Dinner conversations often revolved around academic achievements, future careers, and the importance of maintaining their cultural heritage while thriving in America. Maria's routine was a carefully choreographed dance between her university studies, long shifts at the family restaurant, and Sunday church services, all while navigating the unspoken pressures of finding a suitable partner within their community. Beneath the surface of this well-ordered life, Maria harbored a quiet longing for something more, something different. She felt a deep-seated desire for independence, a need to forge her own path away from the well-trodden expectations of her family. She loved them fiercely, but sometimes felt overshadowed, especially by her older brother, a successful engineer, and her sister, a budding doctor. They were the golden children, their achievements always held up as examples. Maria, with her secret sketches and half-written stories, often felt overlooked, her artistic passion seen as a whimsical distraction rather than a serious pursuit. She kept this part of herself hidden, a vulnerable secret she rarely shared. It was into this carefully constructed world that Mr. Kim first appeared. He wasn't just a regular customer at their restaurant. He was a presence. Tall, impeccably dressed, with an aura of quiet authority that drew attention without him ever needing to raise his voice. He represented success, power, and a certain kind of security that appealed to her parents' aspirations for their children. He spoke respectfully to her father, praised her mother's cooking, and always left a generous tip. To Maria, he initially seemed like a charismatic businessman, a man who had made his mark. He would sometimes catch her eye across the restaurant, offering a small, knowing smile that made her feel seen, in a way her family rarely did. Her family, especially her parents, were impressed by him. They saw him as a symbol of what one could achieve. They subtly encouraged Maria to be polite, to engage with him when he visited. He began to frequent the restaurant more often, always seeking out her section. He would ask about her studies, her dreams, and unlike her family, he seemed to genuinely listen when she spoke about things beyond grades or future jobs. He made her feel sophisticated, understood. For a young woman yearning for independence and a life beyond the restaurant kitchen, his charm was potent. He offered a glimpse into a world of status and influence, a world that seemed to promise an escape from the quiet desperation she sometimes felt. This connection, born out of her own vulnerabilities and her family's hopes, slowly deepened, becoming something complex and emotionally charged. Long before the reality of his true nature came crashing down around her, she was drawn to the excitement, the forbidden allure, and the promise of a life that felt, at the time, like her own. The initial charm of Mr. Kim, the excitement he represented, slowly started to crack. It wasn't a sudden break, but a gradual erosion, like water wearing away stone. Maria began to see the small, almost imperceptible ways his true nature would surface, chipping away at the foundation of what she thought they had. He made promises that never quite materialized. There was the time he talked about investing in a small art gallery for her, a place where she could showcase her own work and other local Korean artists. He painted a vivid picture of her managing it, nurturing talent, finally pursuing her hidden passion. She poured hours into researching locations, drafting business plans, fueled by a hope she hadn't felt in years. Then, one day, he simply stopped talking about it. When she brought it up, he'd wave it off, saying the market wasn't right or that he had more pressing business. It left her feeling foolish, like her dreams were just a game to him, easily discarded. Each broken promise was a quiet sting, making her feel used, as if her aspirations were just tools for him to appear generous. Then there were the veiled humiliations. At first, they felt like clumsy jokes, almost endearing in their awkwardness. He'd make comments about her youthful idealism in front of his business associates, or casually dismiss her opinions on a topic she knew well, then turn to a man for the real answer. Sometimes he'd advise her on her wardrobe or her hair, suggesting she dress more appropriately for his circles, implying her natural style wasn't good enough. These weren't outright insults, but they were consistent, subtle put-downs that slowly chipped away at her confidence. They were often disguised as care or guidance, especially within the deferential cultural context she grew up in, making it hard for her to even identify them as hurtful, let alone push back. She'd find herself questioning her own judgment, her own worth. His manipulation was perhaps the most insidious. He began to subtly discourage her from spending time with her close friends, painting them as bad influences who didn't understand her potential. He'd make plans that conflicted with her family gatherings, forcing her to choose and making her feel guilty when she tried to balance both. He even started to sow seeds of doubt about her artistic pursuits, suggesting they were impractical and a distraction from more sensible paths. He'd praise her family's traditional values, then use those same values to gently push her away from her independent ideas, making her feel like she was betraying her roots by wanting something different. He wasn't overtly controlling, but his actions slowly built a wall around her, making her increasingly dependent on him for validation and direction. There were also specific moments of injustice that stung deeply. She had an idea for a fusion dish at her family's restaurant, something that blended traditional Korean flavors with modern American techniques. She worked tirelessly on it, perfecting the recipe. Mr. Kim tasted it, praised it, and then, without her knowledge, presented it as his own idea to a restaurant group he was trying to impress, even using her family's name as a leverage point. She only found out when she overheard him bragging about it on the phone. Another time, he used her family's reputation and connections within the Korean-American business community to secure a deal, without ever involving them or giving them credit. He exploited their trust, their hard work, and her own naive belief in his good intentions, all for his own gain. These past events weren't just isolated incidents. They were pieces of a puzzle that slowly revealed a much darker picture. The initial betrayal, the shock of waking up in his bed, wasn't a sudden, out-of-nowhere event. It was the culmination of years of emotional abuse, control, and a steady erosion of her spirit. She had been living in a slow-motion trap, and the pregnancy test was just the final, undeniable proof that she had to break free. The emotional atmosphere between them grew heavy, becoming almost suffocating. It was no longer just about subtle slights or hidden manipulations. Mr. Kim's behavior became erratic, his demands more frequent and less veiled. He started calling her constantly, wanting to know where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. If she didn't answer immediately, he would show up at her family's restaurant, his presence a dark cloud that made everyone uncomfortable. He expected her to drop everything for him, to be available at his whim. Her growing resistance to this control only made him more insistent, turning small disagreements into full-blown arguments that left her drained and anxious. Their conflicts intensified, moving beyond quiet tension to open hostility. Arguments became common, often exploding in public places, much to her embarrassment. He would accuse her of being ungrateful, of not appreciating all he had done for her. She, in turn, would push back, pointing out his broken promises and his dismissive attitude. But her attempts to stand up for herself were usually met with a cold stare or a cutting remark that reminded her of his power. He started making decisions for her without asking, like canceling her art classes or telling her family she wouldn't be able to help at the restaurant because she was busy with his affairs. Each argument felt like another chain tightening around her, pulling her further into his world, away from her own. The social pressures mounted with every public display of his possessiveness. Rumors began to circulate within their tight-knit Korean-American community. Whispers followed her in the grocery store, at church, even within her own family gatherings. People would look at her with pity, or worse, with judgment. Mr. Kim, far from trying to quell the gossip, seemed to revel in it. He would make grand gestures, publicly buying her expensive gifts, or making sure everyone saw them together, reinforcing the idea that she was his. Her family, initially impressed by his status, grew increasingly concerned. They saw her becoming withdrawn, her vibrant spirit dimming. They tried to talk to her, but their concerns often felt like accusations, adding to her isolation. Neighbors and relatives, who once praised her, now openly discussed her choices, judging her for staying with a man they now saw as controlling and dangerous. Mr. Kim's mask fell away completely during this period. The charming, charismatic businessman was gone, replaced by a darker, more possessive figure. His threats became explicit, no longer just veiled suggestions. He would remind her of his connections, telling her that if she ever thought of leaving, he would make sure her family's business suffered, or that her reputation would be ruined beyond repair. He leveraged his power and influence, not subtly, but openly, to intimidate her. He knew where her family lived, where her younger sister went to school, and he wasn't afraid to hint at what could happen if she crossed him. His eyes, once full of a calculated charm, now held a cold, unwavering intensity that promised retribution. She felt utterly suffocated. The weight of external judgment, combined with Mr. Kim's oppressive control, became unbearable. Every breath felt shallow, every step heavy. She was trapped, isolated from her friends who he had successfully pushed away, and feeling misunderstood by her family, who couldn't fully grasp the extent of his hold. The vibrant, independent woman she once was had been buried under layers of fear and despair. This was the peak of her emotional torment, a breaking point where the air itself seemed to press down on her, threatening to crush her spirit entirely. She knew, deep down, that something had to give. The life she was living was no longer sustainable. Then came the night everything changed. It wasn't a slow build-up. It was a sudden, jarring crash that shattered the suffocating cycle she had been trapped in. She had been at one of Mr. Kim's late-night business meetings, really just a lavish party filled with men in expensive suits and women who looked too young to be there. She felt out of place, as always, a silent observer in his world. She was tired, wanting nothing more than to go home, but he had insisted she stay by his side. She remembered feeling a headache coming on, the kind that throbbed behind her eyes. She decided to slip away for a moment, hoping a quiet corner might offer some relief. She wandered into what looked like a private study, a room she hadn't seen before. It was dimly lit, filled with dark wood and heavy books. On a large mahogany desk, a laptop lay open, its screen glowing faintly. She didn't mean to look, but a document was visible, its title catching her eye. Operation Midnight Sun, Asset Acquisition. Curiosity, a dangerous thing in her situation, pulled her closer. She saw names, dates, and locations. At first, it was just jargon, but then she recognized a street address, one very familiar to her. It was the address of her family's main restaurant, the one her parents had poured their lives into. Below it, a figure, a sum of money, and the words, "Foreclosure initiated, 30 days." Her breath hitched. Foreclosure. Her family's restaurant? It couldn't be. She scrolled down, her fingers trembling. More names, more addresses, small businesses, all Korean-owned, all in her neighborhood. And below them, Mr. Kim's name, not as a buyer, but as the orchestrator of these actions. He wasn't just a powerful businessman. He was actively targeting and dismantling her community, her family's legacy. He had been using his influence, his connections, not to help, but to systematically destroy the very fabric of their lives, all to expand his own empire. This wasn't just about control over her. It was about tearing down everything she held dear. He had been charming her family, pretending to be a benefactor, while at the same time pulling the rug out from under them. The headache was gone, replaced by a cold, searing clarity. This wasn't just emotional abuse anymore. This was a direct threat to her entire world. The thought of her parents, who had worked tirelessly their whole lives, losing everything because of him, filled her with a rage she hadn't known she possessed. She felt a burning need to act, to stop him. The fear that had kept her paralyzed for so long suddenly felt small compared to the immense danger her family was in. She quickly snapped a few photos of the screen with her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the risk she was taking, but it didn't matter. She had to expose him, to save her family, to save her community. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was for everyone he was trying to crush. She carefully closed the laptop, trying to leave no trace, and slipped back out of the study. Her mind was racing, planning. She had to find help, someone who could understand what she had found, someone who could stand up to Mr. Kim. The idea of going to the police was terrifying, but what other choice did she have? This discovery twisted the knife, but also gave her something to fight for. It wasn't just about escaping him anymore. It was about revenge, about justice. The victim was gone, replaced by a warrior. The cycle of suffering was broken. From this moment on, she was no longer a pawn in his game. She was a player, and she was coming for him. The revelation about Operation Midnight Sun hit her with a force that knocked the wind out of her. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, guttural grief for the life she thought she had, for the man she once believed Mr. Kim to be, and for the peace her family deserved. Fear, a constant companion, now morphed into something sharper, a primal terror for her safety, but also a burgeoning rage that burned away the shame, community judgment. A fear that had always hovered now felt like a distant hum compared to the immediate threat. She felt an explosive release of bottled-up anger, years of silent suffering finally finding an outlet in this terrifying discovery. Her family's reaction was a slow-motion car crash. When she finally found a moment to cautiously share what she'd uncovered, showing them the photos on her phone, the initial disbelief gave way to a mixture of horror and betrayal. Her father, a man whose strength she had always admired, looked as though he'd aged 20 years in an instant. Her mother, usually the picture of stoicism, openly wept, murmuring about how they had welcomed him into their home, how they had trusted him. The man they had seen as a potential son-in-law, a pillar of the community, was actually a wolf in sheep's clothing, systematically destroying their livelihoods. Some relatives, unfortunately, turned against her. Whispers started, fueled by Mr. Kim's carefully cultivated image. Why would he do such a thing? She must have provoked him. She was too ambitious, too independent. This is what happens when you stray from tradition. They blamed her, not him, for the escalating situation. The shame from these judgments was a heavy blanket, but it couldn't smother the fire that now raged within her. But then there were the unexpected allies. Her younger brother, usually quiet and focused on his studies, found a fierce protectiveness he hadn't shown before. He spent hours researching, looking for legal loopholes, for ways to fight back. An old friend from high school, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, reached out. She was a budding journalist, and when she heard the story, she saw not just a scandal, but a systemic injustice that needed to be exposed. These unexpected hands of support were crucial, providing not just emotional comfort, but practical advice and a sense of not being utterly alone. The Korean-American community reacted strongly, as expected. Traditional values clashed violently against modern views on justice and personal autonomy. Gossip spread like wildfire. Some families, those whose businesses were also targeted, initially rallied around her, their fear mirroring her own. Others, still under Mr. Kim's influence or too afraid to speak out, distanced themselves, creating an isolating chasm. The pressure to conform, to keep silent, to protect the community's honor, was intense. There were veiled threats, warnings to let sleeping dogs lie, but she couldn't. Not anymore. Psychological trauma was a constant companion. Sleep was elusive, haunted by images of Mr. Kim's cold eyes, by the thought of her family losing everything. The weight of her decision to expose him, to actively fight back, pressed down on her. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every unexpected sound made her jump. Yet, amidst this fear and anxiety, a new, fierce determination began to blossom. It was a burgeoning sense of empowerment, a realization that she was no longer a victim. She was fighting for her family, for her community, and now, for the innocent life growing inside her. The pregnancy test, once a symbol of a calculated trap, now felt like a shield, a powerful reason to protect herself and her unborn child at all costs. She grappled with the enormity of what she was doing, but the thought of her child, a new beginning, solidified her resolve. She would not let Mr. Kim take everything from them. The arduous process of rebuilding began, piece by painful piece. She channeled her newfound strength into creating a secure future, not just for herself, but for the tiny life nestled within her. The initial shock gave way to a focused resolve. She worked tirelessly, using the connections her journalist friend provided, carefully documenting every detail of Mr. Kim's illicit activities. Her brother, with his sharp legal mind, helped her organize the evidence. They weren't seeking revenge, but justice, a clear distinction she made repeatedly to her family, who were still reeling from the revelations. Mr. Kim, once an untouchable figure, began to unravel. The public exposure of his criminal enterprise, coupled with her meticulously gathered evidence, triggered investigations from multiple agencies. His carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of truth. His powerful allies, fearing their own reputations and businesses would be dragged down, began to distance themselves. The whispers in the community changed from judgment of her to condemnation of him. His empire, built on fear and illicit dealings, started to collapse. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic fall, but a slow, agonizing dismantle, each piece of evidence a nail in his coffin. He faced legal repercussions that stripped away his wealth and, more importantly, his freedom, the loss of power and respect within his community, the very thing he craved and manipulated was perhaps the most bitter pill for him to swallow. The justice served was not a swift Hollywood ending, but a realistic, grinding process that reflected the complexities of their world, where even powerful men could be brought down. Amidst the legal battles and community upheaval, she found solace and purpose in her long-neglected artistic passions. She started painting again, her canvases now filled with vibrant colors and raw emotion, reflecting her journey from darkness to light. It was a form of therapy, a way to process the trauma and celebrate her resilience. She opened a small online gallery, and surprisingly, her art resonated with people, not just for its beauty, but for the story it subtly told. It brought her a new sense of purpose, a creative outlet that was entirely her own, unburdened by expectations or manipulation. Her relationships with her family also began to redefine themselves. The crisis had stripped away the old pressures and expectations, forcing them to see her not just as a daughter or sister, but as a formidable woman who had saved them. Her parents, humbled and repentant for their initial blindness, offered unwavering support. They finally understood her yearning for independence, realizing that her strength was not a defiance of tradition, but a modern expression of it. They started listening, truly listening, to her ideas and dreams, creating a new dynamic built on mutual respect and understanding. Her younger brother became her closest confidant, their bond forged in the fires of adversity. The community, too, began to heal and shift its perspective. Those who had judged her now admired her courage. Her story became a quiet inspiration, a testament to standing up for what is right, even when it means challenging deeply entrenched norms. Looking towards the future, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her child, a healthy baby girl, was her greatest joy and a constant reminder of the new beginning she had fought so hard for. She often found herself watching her daughter sleep, a gentle smile on her face, reflecting on the winding path that had led her here. It was a journey marked by fear, betrayal, and immense pain, but also by an incredible discovery of her own resilience. She had learned that true strength wasn't about avoiding storms, but about learning to navigate them, to rebuild, and to bloom even in the harshest of conditions. Her life was a testament to the profound impact of choosing self-preservation and justice over fear. A survivor with a new beginning, ready to face whatever came next on her own terms.